Hi everybody and welcome to this week's bonus podcast, and it is one of those episodes. It's going to be a long one. Finally, after like 20 weeks or so, we've caught up with the next 5 years of classic Coronation Street. So today we're going to be talking about the episodes that we've seen between 2000 and the end of 2004. What's next? I'm Michael. Who are you?
Gemma.
Thought you were. How you doing? Oh, right. So I don't just... We just have to say that because it's the thing we say at the beginning of the podcast. You know who you're listening to, everybody. And probably what you're listening to too, because it's in the title of this. Gemma, I need to ask, how did you find our latest foray into classic-ish Coronation Street? And it's classic-ish because we're getting closer and closer to modern day, aren't we? Now we're past the millennium.
I'm not enjoying it as much.
And as much as what?
As much as the older episodes.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I'm kind of enjoying it. And looking down the notes that we've been making over the last few months, I'm like going, oh yeah, there's some quite good episodes there. There were some definite, like, great episodes. But there weren't really quite ones. So many fairly good ones. No. There were like some really great ones. A decent number of, that was quite good ones. But not so many of the in-betweens, you know? And there were definitely some where I thought, that was a fairly dull episode, apart from a particularly memorable scene, maybe. So I have been enjoying it, but it's not grabbed me as much as some of the older ones, for sure. And it definitely feels... it feels like we're past the golden age. I don't know, you know, it's hard to put, but maybe as we discuss it, we'll be able to put our fingers on exactly what it was.
Well, I know what it was. It's because there's less of a feel of like exciting exploration that there has been in the older ones, where I'm like, oh, this is something famous that I've heard about, or I'm glad I get to find out more about this character, or there's also like the interest that I feel about looking back at how people used to live in different eras, and like before the 80s it was like, wow, it was like that before I was born, and then when it was the 80s it's like, oh yeah, I remember when it was like that. And it's also like some of the stuff I've already seen before, or I know the characters. And also the other thing is there are more episodes. And I said this before when I've said I didn't enjoy it as much for other time periods, but then there are more episodes, so the stories are spread out more, and there are fewer episodes that we actually watch. So I'm not getting, like, back in the very early times, I feel like episodes were a bit more standalone than they are now, but also I feel like I got to see all of a story, you know, from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a cat. And now it's like, oh, here's the end of this story, or mostly this is the ending of the so-and-so story.
There's been some that we've seen, you know, I tried to pick a variety of episodes throughout it, like the Hillman saga, which I'm sure we'll get to quite soon, because that to me was still the biggest story of this 5-year period. But yeah, I get what you're saying about it not feeling as new, or, you know, discovering, because this was the era when you started to watch it, wasn't it? You started watching when we first met, and that was in 2001. So but although you didn't watch all of it during that period, because, you know, if we were ever separated, like in the summer holidays or Christmas or whatever, you wouldn't watch it then. Then there was, of course, the year where I was living abroad in France. That was like late 2003 to summer 2004, so you didn't watch it then. Even I didn't watch it then. So there were some episodes that are on here that I hadn't seen before, although I was able to catch up with the Coronation Street visual updates, but now I got to see them, which is good. But
I just want to say that it's quite funny thinking back, because it was, I mean, it was, and it wasn't a long time ago. But hilariously, when you lived in France, the only way for you to watch episodes of Coronation Street would be to get them recorded on a VHS tape.
Yeah.
And then you could watch them on your little portable, like we used to. It's very, very common in that era to have a TV that had a VCR.
Yeah, the little combi in there. I didn't think I did have very many things recorded.
The screen of the TV was like
a little 14-inch.
Yeah, barely wider than an iPad.
Yeah,
the resolution was crap. Yeah, you didn't get very many episodes. I was just saying, if you were to request one.
Yeah.
Because I remember I brought you an episode of something. I think it was the live episode of The Bill.
Yes, it was.
And you hated the fact that I laughed all the way through it, and then you told me off and we had an argument.
Yeah, I remember that. I can't believe you still remember that.
Well, I remember every argument we've ever had.
Oh my gosh, you've got a very good memory then. You're right about it being. It's funny how it's modern but not quite, isn't it? Because it definitely feels a lot closer than it ever has to modern Corrie. It feels like, I mean, what they're getting up to could be happening right now, apart from the prevalence of mobile phones and internet still isn't the same as it is these days. Although a lot of the characters do seem to have mobiles, don't they? They don't really talk about the internet so much in it. Although there was, of course, that episode with Sarah-Louise and her internet stalker. So it's funny how quickly it's been catching up to these days. I'll tell you another thing
that's interesting about what you said about the internet thing is that I bet you, if you were watching it at the time, that storyline, you would have been, oh, this is so out of touch and clunky. But watching back now, I'm like, wow, how cutting edge that they're covering such a modern topic. Like it felt really like contemporary, didn't it, for them to do that, because that was the era where our parents were always like, don't go on the internet because it's full of paedophiles and nobody on the internet is really who they say they are, and everyone's lying and they're all secretly middle-aged men.
Yeah. Now that was an episode that you hadn't seen before, wasn't it? But it was one that you'd heard about. It's quite a famous episode at the time. So Sarah-Louise gets chatted up online by some guy who says that he's maybe a few years older than her, goes round to his house, and it turns out that he's like 30 or something.
Oh, he's so old.
He was pretty creepy, wasn't he?
30. He had a cardigan
on. But so tell you what, Sarah-Louise.
I love that episode.
Yeah, it was dark and creepy and on edge, wasn't it?
Was fantastic. I don't know what the actor is called, but he was so good at playing this like incredibly sinister and creepy like man who's like trying to lie to Sarah, to say anything he can to get her to feel comfortable and try to. I don't know what his end game. Well, we know what his end game was, but I don't know how he thought he could get from where he was to what he wanted.
I enjoyed one of the things I enjoyed there, that it was filmed in someone's house and it didn't feel setty at all, and then they made good use of going around the corridors and going upstairs, her hiding under the bed and everything, and then that great sequence at the end where Dennis Stringer comes to rescue her after. Like Candice goes and finds out what it says that she's there or something. I can't remember what it was. And they have that massive attack music and a great long
teardrop.
Yeah. And then they have a great long shot from the corridor outside and then kind of up into the sky, like it was like a drone shot. But obviously, it wasn't bad.
It was very powerful.
That was so well done.
And luckily for them, that song has not really dated. Like it still feels like you could use that music now in a dramatic scene, and it would give it a sort of melancholic, poignant atmosphere. But like that was very dangerous to use. I assume it was. I don't know when that came out.
That was 2000. Let me just have a look. I know. Oh no, yeah, no, I don't know. That was 2001. The episode, wasn't it? I feel that there were more episodes in this era that sort of melancholic.
That was from 98, so
okay.
It was.
Fairly modern then. Yeah, there were quite a few episodes there where that kind of music could have fit in, because I would say melancholic was the tone of, not the majority of it or anything, but more things did feel a bit darker and grimier and grittier, which we were saying at the late 90s. The transition from classic Corrie into modern Corrie had well and truly happened by the end, by the period that we've just reached, hasn't it?
That's the thing also, is that these episodes are cherry-picked, and the big major stories in this era were sort of headline-grabbing and trying to compete with the other big TV shows. And, 2000... The early 2000s was when sort of big headlining TV shows really became an important part of pop culture. Like TV was always has had its place, but it felt a bit more disposable and a bit more kind of, I don't know, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's only really with the advent of shows like Lost and Desperate Housewives that tentpole television with big stars and big names became really important.
Yeah.
And it's not like TV never had big, like, culty following before then. Like, I'm thinking of, like, The X-Files, for example, that and Buffy. That was, like, the very, very beginning of this new era of fandom and television watching, where people could talk on the internet about what they were watching. So definitely The X-Files and Buffy had that, like, people on, like, BBS forums and stuff talking about the show. Yeah. So TV probably, it feels like, you know, this is very uneducated, got a bit darker and a bit more involved because it was fostering a different kind of viewing experience, and it was also competing with different. And the other thing about it too is that you know, the ones that we're watching are the ones that stick in everyone's mind, or that they were important, and those are going to be the stories that revolve around fairly dark things.
I mean, 2001 itself, that also had Alma's death and Toya's rape as well. So it was a bit of a dark year for Corrie, both of which I think were done very well. And I know that you know, both have had various criticisms given to them, you know, the misery of Toya's death around Easter, rape around Easter, Alma's death happening a little bit too quickly just to speed it up for story drama purposes, but they were both really, really well done. And I think with Toya and Sarah-Louise, actually, Georgia Taylor and Tina O'Brien showed just how brilliant young actresses they were back then, and they were used a lot, weren't they? Because this is it was around was it 2000 maybe, or maybe it was late 99, I can't remember, that Tina O'Brien took over as Sarah-Louise, and she had the pregnancy stuff in 2000, didn't she, when she gave birth to Brittany at first, who later renamed Bethany, and then she had this internet storyline, the Stalker, and of course the Richard Hillman story that she was quite key in. Toya, we were noted that towards the end of the 90s she was used tons, wasn't she, considering that now the character of Toya often gets sidelined. She was huge name in Coronation Street back then.
I think it's also interesting how little there really was a Chav Toya. Like, she came in, the first episode she was ever in, she nicked that drill out of
Bill's van,
and gave it to her dad as a present. And they were, you know, her and Leanne Scobbald, and she was kind of, you know, very kind of slobbish appearance, and I think she smoked as well, did she? Yeah. So, you know, she was very rebellious and chavvy. But then she really changed quite rapidly into a very similar person to the Toya that we know now. That's why she ended up going to university and everything.
Did she go to university?
She had a lecturer.
That was a college lecturer.
But
I thought it was funny because she was getting she was getting out with her lecturer, wasn't she? And Les was saying that he was a lecturer or something like that. It was quite funny.
Yeah, it was a good pun.
What were you saying?
She, in a way, and this is going to sound weird, she kind of reminds me a little bit of Ken, in that it's a generation of people that feel as though they are defining an era. Okay, so she's like an elder millennial or a zennial, or the very end of Gen Z, or the cusp of this generation of people who are you know, like, it's like a notable generation, the same way that Ken was in the generation of kids that were growing up to sort of, you know, like hippies and stuff, you know? And they're not quite a part of the mainstream, but they definitely represent a rebellious sort of spirit to their parents. And it's funny because Toya's rebellion is the same as Ken's, in that she went to educate herself and rejected the sort of more working class roots of her family, and therefore kind of alienated herself a little bit from them.
I think it was funny how quickly and how early the character was dropped, because she was 2003, I think, so she only had 5-6 years or so in this show, and then she was gone for another 15 years or so, and now it feels weird. Like she's kind of always been in it.
I know.
It's like there was never a gap. And Leanne as well, she went even earlier than Toya, didn't she? She went, I can't remember where she went off to. And we've just seen in a recent episode her being discovered again in was like it was a massage parlor or something, belly dancing. Yeah. That was a bit weird.
And it was really interesting, actually, how funny and the attitudes have changed about, like, the guy. Who's the guy? The taxi driver. Patrick. So they all went off, and it was, I can't remember who.
It's Patrick, Les. Can't remember who else was there.
And a bunch of other people, but so they went to this club, and all of the waitresses were dressed in belly dancing outfits, and then Patrick starts feeling them up.
He does give Leanne's bum a squeeze, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he's like, what's your problem? And he was getting really aggressive with them, and she was sort of slapping him, and they were fighting with each other because he wanted to touch her and she didn't want to. But he wasn't the villain of this story. It was just a funny, hilarious misunderstanding. And in a way, it was actually Leanne's character that was in the wrong, because it's like, well, if you don't want to be felt up, you shouldn't be a belly dancer. You know what I mean? It's like, now you could never have that at all. And it is really funny, because I remember when I was a cleaner about this time, I had a guy from a different campus, a cleaner from a different campus, came to cover somebody who was away, and he was telling me about an exhibition, because he came from Winchester, which is the art campus of Southampton University, and he was telling me that there was one of the students was doing a performative art where she walked around naked, right? And he was scandalised by this, but the reason that he was scandalised is he said, and you weren't even allowed to touch her.
Really?
And that was his major gripe with the fact that she was naked. And he really felt entitled and confused and angry about the fact that he wasn't allowed to. And it's like really interesting, because this was not that long ago.
Well, no, and that was something that we remarked on as well, with the whole stuff with Todd coming out, didn't we? And some of the attitudes. And this is 2004 maybe that he came out. And that was a great story. There were some wonderful scenes between Todd and Eileen, weren't they? When he first reveals to her, I'm in love with a man. Who was it that he fancied? Was it Carl at work? I can't remember. And her, she didn't automatically kind of acceptance straight away, and some of the words that were being used, like Vera in the cafe, and she was calling him all sorts. He was saying, "Oh, these fairies, such and
you're
such."
Not allowed in here.
She literally wouldn't serve Todd because he was a fairy, in her words.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that Coronation Street felt a lot freer for characters to represent views that. So I can't really remember that far back about how I felt personally about people being gay. I didn't know any. Well, actually, that's not true. I think we were pretty accepting. Because my mum's best friend was gay, and I didn't really have an opinion about it. But I think in general at the time, it's not like if you're like, it was a big thing to come out. And I think everyone was kind of accepting, but there were always jokes and silly comments about people being gay. But Coronation Street felt a bit freer for characters to represent that spectrum of views a bit more honestly than they do now. So now, first of all, I don't think it would be a big deal if a character came out.
No.
But secondly, if they did, if the parent then didn't wholeheartedly accept them, because we had that with Dev, didn't we? And he was struggling with it, but his problem was like, how are you gonna live your life, you know? And that's a very kind of positive reaction for, like, it shows that they're worried about it, but only for the person, not for any other reason. Whereas Eileen kind of struggled with it a little bit, and she was very confused. And she wasn't positive about him. But then, you can say in that time it wasn't great. It wasn't a great experience to be gay anyway. Not that it always is now either. But I just find it interesting that characters really had a bit more of a grey spectrum of opinions, and they weren't necessarily a villain or a goodie or a baddie. Whereas now I think everyone's very anodyne, and everybody has the same opinions about everything, and everyone's very PC. And if they say something ignorant, they're swiftly educated, and they're very apologetic, and they learn their lesson. Like when we had with the racism storyline, with everyone in the Rovers talking about racism and all learning how that it's bad. And so, like, I can't see that happening back in the old days.
Yeah,
honestly, I find it more interesting in the old days. I know it was more offensive, and it's easy for me to say that. but equally I'm a woman, and the attitudes towards women were horrific, but I still find it interesting and entertaining sometimes to learn about other people's opinions.
Yeah.
And it felt like people weren't as threatened.
Along those similar lines about people weren't necessarily villainized for having these particular attitudes. You were also noticing, I suppose I was as well, but the smoking thing as well. Yeah. We often mention, like, these days, if someone's got a cigarette in their mouth, that's how you know they're a villain. You got a couple of vapors that are still left, but barely even that we see at the moment. But back even 2004, you had Karen McDonald's smoking on a fag, didn't you? And it was just, she did. And that quick turnaround in less than 15 years or whatever is quite remarkable.
It makes you wonder, what with the Rovers being a less used set because of COVID, whether there will be some kind of, because I think that smoking, like the new smoking is either going to be meat eating or it's going to be drinking. It's going to be something, that everyone's
We're going to look back and say, I can't believe
everybody just used to sit and drink all night.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like people don't want to give those things up, but equally, nobody wanted to give up smoking inside, did they?
No. You still had people like Blanche who were very free with their views about things, weren't they?
Oh yeah,
she
Blanche
was great.
She was. See, the thing is about Blanche is that she transitioned into being non-politically correct as a joke, but before that happened, she was just saying what they thought an old lady would say.
Yeah.
Like it became funny, and the character was sort of, the writers were sort of in on the joke that, God, can you believe that Blanche said homosexual?
How she says it, homosexual.
Yeah, but before then she was like just being an old lady, just being very intolerant.
Yeah, totally. The only
and I don't want anyone to come away with this thinking, the only reason I like it is because everyone was free to be a horrible bigot. No, I don't agree with with what they were saying, but I don't think it's healthy or useful for a show, especially like Coronation Street, that's supposed to represent a group of different people, to pretend that these attitudes don't exist. Because I think that's part of our problem now, is that we pretend we've cured racism, we've cured homophobia, and it's not true. And really, it should be obvious that it's not true, but instead it's just hidden and festering.
Yeah.
And then it sort of blows up in someone's face, and everyone's surprised that these people still, have this attitude. It shouldn't be surprising. But because it's all sanitised and hidden away now, and we don't confront
or like you said, it just comes across as
like a public service announcement.
A bit like the James racism storyline this year.
Here's a very special episode about, Dev discovering the word woke.
Yeah. The other thing that I think that an episode that felt like, I don't know whether they could do that these days, was the Ida Fag episode where Jack dresses up as a woman for the female bowls team, and that was brilliant. That was so funny.
It's really, you could not do that now.
No, and that was 15, 16 years ago.
About Jack dressing up.
Putting on a silly voice, and then he meets this what is it, Edie Bagshaw, his rival, that turns out that it was actually somebody called Eddie Bagshaw that he did his national service with once, and
so she was actually a trans woman.
Two blokes on a women's team. You couldn't say that these days, but the episode itself was still pretty gold, I would say. And when Vera there, she's lost her glasses, so she hasn't noticed him, and she's like, I'm sure I recognise that Ida Fag from somewhere. It was so good.
It's obvious that things like that contributed to a toxic environment for people, trans people, gay people, etc. And it probably wasn't helpful, but it was still just part of how people used to tell stories.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, although you do say these days, what's going to be offensive now that in the future that's now? I don't think anything really, because everything's so carefully considered and everyone's worried about offending people.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to isolate these things and watch them in the time that they were created, and it's only 15 years ago. That's the crazy thing to me.
I know.
This is why I kept saying about you know,
it's happened so quick.
People forget how quickly this happened.
And not only was it only 15 years ago, you can also say this was only, you know, 5, 6, 7 years before we started the podcast as well. I know. That's what seems funniest. Like, we were barely out of this era by the time we started Conversation Street.
It is funny.
Yeah.
It's really weird, and you know, yeah, it's like Carry On films and stuff.
Yeah, you can still enjoy them.
And like Benny Hill, so offensive, but I can also laugh at them. And I don't, you know, like they were very, very, a lot of this stuff was very sexist.
Yeah.
And as a woman, I can still go, silly.
Oh, I can't believe they used to have that.
Boobs.
I know. All right, okay, let's see what else we think characterises this era. I would say that there was a real kind of explosion of characters. Lots more new characters in this 5-year period, some of which are still going now, some of which didn't stay for very long. I mean, we talked about that, about Patrick, the cabbie, for example.
Yeah, but I would say a lot of these are like household names now.
They are, but it was funny watching it, because it felt like, oh yeah, this was like this little bunch of characters, because before this era, you had still... I don't know. You had your group of classic characters with your Alex and your Bets and your Lens and everything, and that felt like a different era. And then you had this that felt like a different era, but it feels very, very separate to modern day Coronation Street. So even though that you still had, you know, Gail was still there, Audrey was still there, you had the beginnings of Fizz and Chesney and everything that was going on with, say, I don't know, Karen and the Harrises and Claire and Bev and Charlie and Shelley, it felt like they're their own little group of characters that came into the show for a little bit, had their stories for about 4 or 5 years, and then disappeared. And then that was literally the very end of those characters. Kieran, Sunita, there, you know what I mean? Lots of characters that belong together and then were forgotten about.
Yeah.
So some of which were quite small. The Baldwins, Danny Baldwin coming in, Frankie Warren, Jamie, and everyone. It was funny that what kind of characters stood out to you? As a one that you enjoyed seeing again.
What do you mean?
Of any of these new ones, these major or minor new characters, who did you enjoy? The most
impressive debut to me was Eileen, who came in the most Eileen that Eileen's ever Eileened. You know. Yeah. And again, interesting. She smoked.
Yeah, she did, didn't she? Yeah.
And it was just...
Eileen's first episode was cracking. She Sue Claver nailed that character right from the start.
Exactly what Eileen was what was expected of Eileen. She delivered it perfectly.
Yeah, she was cocky. She was knowledgeable. Changed. She had Steve and Vikram wrapped around her little finger. Very she kind of talked herself into a job.
Has changed about Eileen over the year. You know?
I think that she's got a bit more world weary
now because she doesn't have as many scenes and. You know, unfortunately, there aren't any good cab office scenes anymore.
No.
COVID.
I remember loving her instantly, and then seeing her back in her debut, I just thought, yeah, Eileen was fantastic back then. She was so good. And the whole of the Grimshaw unit, I really, really enjoyed having Bruno there as Todd and Ryan James as. Ryan Thomas, as Jason. They had some great little scenes together, but particularly the Todd coming out to Eileen scene was so well done. And then of course you had the Eileen and Gail fight, which we watched. And I was when we came up to that, I thought, oh, is it going to be as good? Because that's one of the scenes that people always bring up, isn't it? As like a classic from that era, and it was just as good to watch it again. It was brilliant. But then you had your Marias, you had your Kirks. Kirk was kind of funny because to me he didn't seem quite so dense back then. They definitely had him saying silly things sometimes, but he felt like he had a little bit more nous to him, don't you think?
I think he's been slowly being poisoned by some kind of horrible brain.
It's whatever's getting Gail, I tell you.
Disease.
He was never the brightest, was he? The brightest bulb, but yeah, he had a bit more to him back then, I think. Tyrone.
Do you reckon they're still using leaded petrol?
Mate,
That's why Maria's complaining. She's got a point.
Tyrone I enjoy back in this era. I mean, I've never stopped liking Tyrone really, but I think it's been funny seeing him kind of grow up as a teenager, and then kind of he's still got a bit of the Scrappy Doo syndrome even in this era, hasn't he? Because like when he was going up against Terry Duckworth, for example, because Terry Duckworth swans in a couple of times in this era, doesn't he, to try and con his parents, and Tyrone's there kind of like puffing himself up to try and stand up to it. It was quite funny. Who else did we have? Karen. She was always one who I look back on. I thought, yeah, I really, really enjoyed Karen. Seeing her this time, it took me a little while to warm up to her, and I think it took a year or so for Saran to probably get into the role. She seemed a bit too nasty and cowy to begin with, but then I think when they took her just that little bit more characterized a little bit. No, that there was that, but it was she was just a bit too horrible to other people. But when maybe when Steve was able to control her a little bit and things blew up in Karen's face, it was quite funny. But I just enjoyed watching her kind of. I liked her looking down on other people, and she would. But when somebody or Steve stood up to her, she kind of like, you know, put her tongue inside her cheek or whatever, and just going, oh whatever. And all the stuff with what else was Karen getting up to? There was the game show episode that we saw recently, wasn't there, where the McDonald's and the Barlows go on the top of the tree, and Karen's
the Barlow McDonald's are
the McDonald's, and she and Steve was trying to hide the fact that he was going on this game show from Karen. What else did Karen get up to? There was the stuff with Joe Carter, that boss at the factory. That was a bit dull.
The thing is, I think I remember watching Karen at the time and enjoying her more than I did in this rewatch, because I don't think the episodes really...
They weren't her best ones.
The thing about
Karen, I liked her more as it went on.
In isolation, she's very abrasive and difficult. But if you watched her story, I think it was easier to like her.
I think I might say that as a whole for this era, because I remember when I watched it, particularly around when the Hillman Sarah story was at its peak, and then for a little while after that, I remember vividly at the time thinking, wow, this is a really great era of Coronation Street. And I'd been watching for 6 or 7 years at that point, so I'd seen the highs and the lows, and some years had felt better than others. But I vividly remember thinking that this 2003, 2002, 2004-ish sort of era was really, you know, top of its game, my favourite Corrie had ever been. I didn't feel it quite so much rewatching it, but I think it was because we were just watching it in bits, like you said. Hillman, then, how did you find that? Because this was the story that got you into it, and I remember at the beginning of the podcast and back in the early days, you always used to say that was the story that hooked you into it and was your favourite Coronation Street story of all time. Did it live up to it when you rewatched it again?
It felt more like vignettes and a highlights reel of something than following a story. And that's the trouble about all of these. And obviously that's what they are. But I feel as though when I watched older Corrie episodes, I felt a bit more like I was following more of a story. That's all. It was fun to watch it. I don't feel like our rewatch captured the essence of it, because a lot of these were like very slow drip, you know.
Well, we saw the Dougie's death episode, didn't we?
Yes.
Which was quite fun, because I can't remember whether you'd watched that at the time. I think I watched that without you, but and then I showed you afterwards, and I hadn't realised that Dougie was going to die at the first. That was the first time that we'd seen Coronation Street in widescreen as well, and I rewatched. That was kind of funny seeing the show evolve in that way. Then we had Patricia's death, where he whacks her with the spade. That was fun. And then we saw all the stuff with Archie and Audrey was great as well, wasn't it? There was that great four-hander in the end, towards the end of 2002, which was Gail, Richard, Audrey and Archie, and that was where Audrey has trapped herself in Archie's house because she thinks that Richard's coming after her, and she thinks she's going insane. She's hysterical, and then Archie gets her to do these tests like she has to have to count down from 100 or something. I can't remember what she does.
And he asks her to remember something, and then he gets her to count down, and then he asks
Yes, that's right.
And I love Archie so much.
Archie was lovely.
I feel like I learned more about Archie's character in this rewatch. And he was so gentle and nice. Just the way he was. I really liked the way that he had to be convinced by what she was saying.
Yeah.
And then eventually he was completely on board with her, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But then there was also a bit where he was like, I don't know, are you mad though?
Yeah, they do this dementia test, and Audrey's thrilled that she can still remember, and this proves to her that she's not going insane. She also remembers about Richard knowing something about a battery and a smoke detector or something, and I think that's the piece of evidence that Archie... that makes him realise, hang on a minute, I think she's onto something here. At the same time in that episode, we have this great couple of monologues from Richard in number 8, where he's telling Gail about his mum or something, I think, and how she got dementia, and how he kind of gradually lost her. Then we had the old Christmas thing where he tries to smother Emily with a pillow. Maxine's death.
Christmas?
Yeah. At Christmas he tries to bash Emily, and then we had Maxine's death in a couple of weeks after that. That was like a late mid-January kind of thing.
Maxine's death afterwards?
Yes, it is. Yes, definitely.
What do you mean?
He tries to bash Emily. He tries to smother Emily at Christmas, and I think that does Rita come along or something?
I'm sorry, that's right. Yeah. I got confused. I was conflating the two.
Yeah, no. Brian Capron was brilliant. He was so sinister.
He tried to smother her to death. Yeah, and then he was like, "That didn't work. I'm gonna have to bash her.
Gonna have to try again." And we have a funeral where he does the speech, and then Audrey's like saying, "You killed it, you killed Maxine," and it was lovely having Archie there by her side. And then we had the fantastic Norman Bates with a briefcase episode, which was where it kind of somebody's leaving party, I can't remember, and throughout the episode Gail is gradually realising, she's piecing together the bits of evidence from like listening to other people, remembering the night of Maxine's death, and then and the fact that she finds out that Aidan Critchley, who he tries to pin the death on, was drugged up on diazepam, which is the medicine that Audrey was having. And then she hears Steve talking about Patricia Hillman's bracelet that was found on the site, and it all comes out in the second episode of the two-parter. Brilliant stuff. And that was almost a two-hander as well, wasn't it? Because you had there's a little bit of David and Sarah-Lou upstairs in the dark, but it was mostly a whole half an hour of just Gail and Richard, and this was Gail at her top form, long before nutcase Gail that we've got these days. And it had some great lines like how could it be an accident, she was hit over the head with the crowbar and stuff. It was I loved it. And then you got your canal splash. That was I loved watching all that again, and it just took me right back to what a brilliant period of Coronation Street that story was. And it's still making me think, but did I like that better, or did I like the Pat Phelan story better? And I don't know. These things are difficult to compare sometimes, aren't they? But that was so well done. What else we got, Gemma? Tell me about something else you've enjoyed in this era, a character or a story or something.
Who did I like? I don't know. What was my favourite story?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know.
Oh, what did you think of? Well, I remember at the time. What about the Bet return? Because that was quite a controversial couple of weeks, wasn't it? So this was 2002 maybe she comes back, and what did you make of that? Because we really enjoyed Bet from the original run.
It was really weird watching it, because it obviously is a car crash, but it just made me feel a bit sad, because it's like, it could have been great, and it's it just and I remember sort of thinking maybe it was, she wouldn't fit in, but actually looking at her in the show and how the show was, I think she could have done it. I think she could have fit in. She couldn't fit in now.
She maybe could have, but I still felt that she was a bit of a fish out of water then.
But there were still characters in it, like Les, for example, that were very weird caricature characters, more symbolic than anything.
It felt to me that when they brought Bet back, they were like, look everybody, Bet's back, let's make every line that she says a quip.
Yes. And... No. I don't mean her performance and her story. I meant the concept. Like, let's bring Bet back. I would have said, yeah, that's a good idea, and she'd fit in. But I agree with what you're saying about the actual way that it was handled, not necessarily very good, and she was even more of a caricature than she's ever been before.
Yeah, and this was only like 7 years after she left the first time, which is barely anything, really, is it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt like whoever it was that got hold of that first script to bring Bet back felt like every single line had to be a funny quip, in the same way that we sometimes complain that we got Sam at the moment, that every line he says whenever he talks feels like it's read out of an encyclopedia. But also she came across as being a bit nasty.
It was all...
She sits in a booth, doesn't she, smoking away at a fag.
Yeah, and she doesn't... It didn't feel like she engaged with anybody properly. It just felt like the writers were like, right, I've got a load of lines, we need to put them in the scene. And they just... And like, it was kind of completely out of context a lot of the time. And she wasn't interacting with people. She was just rattling off a bunch of one-liners.
Yeah.
Like somebody's, like a kid who's just found a joke book. And they just want to keep coming out with all the funny lines that they've thought of. But they don't fit...
Yeah.
The circumstances.
It was almost like a carousel of characters that would go up to her. Like Rita went up to her and was like, "Oh, I still hate you," and then and Steve goes up to her, who's obviously got the history with Vicky and everything, and it just didn't work. And we only saw that one episode, didn't we, of her comeback, and she only stayed for what, a week, 2 weeks maybe, and then she was gone. Then she returned again in late 2003. And that was the Blackpool episode. So that was Fred, Bet, Liz. Was Jim there? I think he was there in Blackpool together. And we saw one episode of that. And that worked a little bit better. And she had kind of a nice send-off where she ends up going back to Brighton with Liz at the end, doesn't she? And she says, "Oh, there's now past tense about Bet Lynch," when they're saying that they, she passed or something. I don't know. It felt a bit better, but overall... I think it probably would have been better if she hadn't come back at all, if that 1995 exit was it.
It's still really weird to me that she and Rita never bothered. Like, it felt like such a missed opportunity, and I can only assume that it was planned for her to stay longer, right?
Yeah.
And I can only assume that they were going to build up to it.
Yeah,
I bet you if they'd known she wouldn't have lasted very long, they would have put more effort into actually tying her story up. But it still sticks in my craw that they haven't, even
not
as a throwaway line, have Rita saying something about Bet.
Yeah.
She's just someone unused to... Like,
they were such great pals.
Even when she's like lecturing somebody about some kind of interpersonal failure of theirs, it would be nice if she used Bet as an example to say something like, I know how you feel. I fell out with one of my best friends for years, but I'm seeing her at Christmas. Just some really throwaway line that if you don't know who she's talking about, it doesn't mean anything to you, but it's part of the story and it's logical. It doesn't feel shoehorned in. But if you know the history, you can go, oh, that's nice to know. Yeah. At least I know now that they're still friends. I just find, Rita, I think she's a bit of an old fraud. But I don't think Coronation Street wants me to think that. And for all her worldly dispensing of wisdom, the fact that she couldn't maintain a relationship with one of the most important people in her life, and she couldn't let bygones be bygones, I think it's a bit of a failure for her character. But equally, knowing Bet, I can imagine that she would never forgive her, because...
It's a shame, because Bet is still... easily one of my favourite characters, top 10, maybe even top 5 Coronation Street characters ever, and it just felt that she went out on a bit of a low eventually. But at least her brief comeback did mean that we got the amazing character of Lillian Spencer for a few weeks.
Oh, she was great, yeah.
I was so excited to show you her, like Maureen Lipman's original role in Coronation Street, and that is how you have a character come in, have almost every line be a zinger, and it absolutely work.
Yeah, it was so well done. It was just packed full of fantastic lines, and again, only got to see a small amount of.
Yeah, we saw 2 or 3 episodes of her, didn't we? But
wow.
I remember at the time just desperately wanting more and being gutted when the character left after like 2 weeks on the show. But yeah, she coming in, she's got a minor bird, Dinah the Miner. You got Fred fawning over her, going, "Oh, she's a very handsome woman, that Lillian." And the relationship with Shelley and Gina behind the bar was brilliant. There was that scene. They're talking. I can't remember what they're talking about. Was it the one where Lillian says, "Oh, Shelley, is that short for anything?" And like, no, it's just Shelley. And Lillian talks about, yeah, my name's Lillian, never Lil. I can't. Oh no, yeah, she says I have a short in my name, and then like Gina says, "Well, so we call you Lillian?" No, dear, Miss Spencer. And there was a great line. I can't remember where it is now, but Gina does this great dopey look where Lillian is.
Yeah,
I can't remember what it was
exactly
now.
What you're talking about, where she just looks really gormless, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And she says that I can't. Yeah,
I can't remember. If you haven't seen these episodes from like July 2002 with Lillian Spencer, you really do owe it to yourself to go and track them down. They're on YouTube. Fantastic character. And then she's there with there's the stuff with Norris, because he's at the time got his Manchester Commonwealth Games outfit on, hasn't he? And he comes in and he leans in a pool of wine on the bar because Lillian's been swirling around some wine, like some kind of
really
wine taster or whatever, and he has a go at her and she's just foul to him. It was so funny, and then she ends up barring everybody for a couple of episodes, doesn't she?
Well, it's a great example of somebody the same way that Sue Cleaver came in as like the absolute essence of Eileen immediately straight off the bat. It's like a very well studied character who had a massive impact instantly, and it's a massive talent to be able to do that with a character, because quite a lot of them come in fairly bland, don't they? Because they're still trying to work out what the character is, who they are, how the actor's going to work with that character, and there are loads of characters who have developed into something much better than they ever were to start with, you know. Lots of people where they finally found their feet after a while and become something amazing. But it's very rare to come in and instantly just be fantastic.
Particularly because this character was never meant to exist, and she was brought in as a last minute, oh my gosh, Julie Goodyear has left the programme, we need to fill this gap in the story quick, what do we do?
And it's really interesting too, because I wouldn't say the script was absolutely zinging. It's more to do with Maureen Lipman's performance of the lines.
It was a mixture. I thought the script was pretty good, but she was wonderful, and up against John Savardin, and then the actresses who played Shelley and Gina as well. They just sparked off each other so well.
But what I mean is, how did they get to that point? Like, how did they know that they were going to get Maureen Lipman in, or
I don't know.
How did they write the script? Because anyone else, I think, with that script wouldn't have been as interesting.
Yeah.
But Maureen Lipman with that character, and also with Evelyn as well, can just say a line that's, anyone else would just be, nothing offensive whatsoever, but they can turn it into the most devastating insult you've ever heard.
Yeah, definitely. Another character that I was excited for you to see for the first time, because this was before you started watching it, was little Wayne. Because one of the things that we saw over this 5 years was the rise of Roy and Hayley as foster parents, wasn't it? We saw Fizz coming in, and Wayne. Did they have? It was Wayne. Was it before or after Fizz? I can't remember. I think it was after. But what did you make of him?
He was adorable, wasn't he? It was weird because he's kind of like a little Chesney, really.
Yeah.
This cute little red-headed waif.
Yeah, he was just so he was like classic tragic orphan, wasn't he?
Corey does those really well.
And your heart just melts for him. And what did they have? They had Roy giving him this animal book, and he's like, "Oh, I hide it under my pillow," and that's what made us think of the report when he came back in a few years ago now. And then they had the story where Roy and Hayley kidnap him in the forest to get him away from his evil stepdad, who was a nasty piece of work, wasn't he?
Naughty.
Alex Swinton.
I know a lot of these are really hard for me to follow, to be honest. These stories, because we didn't get to see every episode of the story, and I felt a bit like I was peeping through someone's window, where I don't get to follow them around all day long. I can't hear what they're saying properly, but I get glimpses and vignettes of things and can kind of infer stuff, but. I think this story was hard to follow.
I just kind of picked it to show you because I wanted to see what you thought of Wayne and just how cute he was.
Yes, he was very cute.
The other thing that I liked from Roy was that Civil War reenactment story.
Yeah, very Roy.
Yeah, where he had his gun and he was stoking it in the supermarket, do you remember? And then he gets arrested.
Yeah, everyone freaks out.
But that was massively farcical, wasn't it? Having Fred Elliott was as the leader of the Cavaliers and Roy as the Roundheads going up against each other on the Red Wreck, and they almost Roy ended up nearly braining Fred at one point. I can't remember.
And they were going to dunk Karen, or no? They.
Oh yeah, didn't they have Karen in the stocks or something?
Because she was a witch.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because Gina and Shelley. Karen gets annoyed that she hasn't got a role in it, doesn't she? And then they say, "Oh, we got the perfect role for you."
She's like, "Yay!"
Yeah.
That was silly.
That was funny.
I tell you what, my favourite story probably was because I don't know that. Did I watch it at the time? Probably, I can't remember, but it was probably the most exciting thing. Mad Maya.
Oh yes, yeah, we definitely watched that at the time because that was 2004, and that's very recent to us because we just saw the big explosion episode a couple of days ago, didn't we? But that's the story when I look back and I think, oh yeah, they said that. I think I remember that being quite big at the time, but I don't particularly remember it that much now. But I trust myself remembering it was big. But was it really? And then when we watched it, it was brilliant. And Mad Maya is like seriously underrated as a Coronation Street villainess.
She is played by Sasha Behar, and she is fantastic.
She's looks that she gives,
one of my favourite Corrie villains.
Yeah, but she doesn't. She's not. She doesn't go down in the history books alongside the Phelans, the Hillmans. Even sometimes Carmel Finnan is remembered more than Maya.
The story is that she fell in love with Dev, and then she was spurned by him, and she's like a solicitor.
She came in as a solicitor to Roy and Hayley in the Wayne case,
and so she kind of got booted out for Sunita, and she was so jealous and she couldn't get over it, and then she burned down all of Dev's shops in one night, and then the final one was the one on Coronation Street, and she tied Sunita and Dev up on the upstairs flat of the shop, and then she turned the gas on, and then she just lit a fire downstairs. And there was a bit before then when a policeman came. He was saying, "Oh, I'm just checking because to see if you're all right." And she pretends to be Sunita.
Yeah. And
I tell you what, she's so fantastic. She's got such a great, sexy, posh villain voice, isn't she? It's like, "Hi, officer. Yes, I'm Sunita. Oh, yes, I'll make sure to look out for her. Don't worry. No need to wait outside."
I like the episode earlier on in the year as well, where she was snooping around trying to get Sunita's passport so that she could pretend to be her and marry all these.
And she hides, and Sunita comes back to look for her medication.
Yeah, Maya nearly clobbers her.
Maya stands against the wall with a raised vase or something, ready to brain her to death.
That was also the episode where we got to see Deirdre with her harmonica.
Yes.
And that came out of nowhere. I remember that Deirdre had every so often, like very, very rarely, it was like a little treat like Rita singing, would get out the harmonica, and it was so good. And Blanche had been there telling her how disappointed she is with her or something. And but then at the end, Blanche is like, "Oh, go on, play a tune." That was we got to see Blanche. I mean Deirdre on the harmonica, and also just recently Norris playing the church organ, didn't he?
But he can only play I Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside or Devil Woman.
That was at Ashley and Claire's wedding.
Yes.
Did you enjoy seeing Claire again? I was a bit like nonplussed by her, which is basically how I think I felt about her at the time. In my head, Ashley and Maxine are the ultimate couple. Maxine is the woman.
No, I think Claire and Ashley made more sense.
They did, but
they felt like much nicer pairing. Maxine always felt a bit tense because I was just waiting for her to walk out on him. But I will say, I reckon watching it back that Claire, her wedding dress was my favourite wedding dress. Oh yeah, you said that.
We were watching that the other day.
She looked so magnificent. The actual dress underneath, I'm not so fussed on. But the coat that she wore over the top, she had like a gauzy hood on the cloak, and it was embellished with pearls, and she just looked amazing. It was great, but ruined everyone's Christmas by insisting on having her wedding on Christmas Day. So her poor bridesmaids had to, a wedding should be a special day on its own. You don't need to put it on Christmas Day too.
I just found the character fairly bland.
Husband won't remember.
It was a bit like, Curly and Emma, because Emma What's-Her-Face came into it in this era.
Face?
She came into it this period, didn't she? And then a couple of years later, dragged Curly off to Newcastle. He didn't really seem like he wanted to go, did he? On the leaving party, doesn't Jack go round to number 7 and find Curly sitting there going, I don't want to go? But she goes off anyway. He just gets a really miserable exit.
I know.
But what he did have was the brilliant Millennium episode a few years before, and that was the first one that we watched in this chunk, wasn't it? Because that was 1st of January 2000, and that was the second one we watched. Because the 1st of January was the Millennium Party, which was quite fun. But Raquel comes back at the end of that episode. Then the 2nd of January we had the Raquel and Curly, and that's got to be up there with that's up there in my top 10 episodes ever. It was an hour long, just Curly and Raquel. It was just perfect for me, and it was so tragic because Curly's got all his hopes up that she's come back for him, and he's excited, and he shows her his telescope and everything. They go up and have a look at the star that's named after her. But then it turns out that she's just come because she wants to. Did she want to get a divorce or something? That so she can marry her Arnaud in France. And the bit where she picks up the phone and speaks like perfect French to Arnaud, which is like the conclusion of this character arc that started back in the early 90s when Raquel wanted to learn to speak French. It was utterly perfect for me. And then there's some great lines as well there, like about wine being good for French babies, and the French being much like the Weatherfield residents because they drop their H's at the beginning of words and stuff. It was utterly magical and mesmerizing, that episode, written by John Stevenson, who's the writer who created Raquel. And weirdly, the bit of trivia about that one is that if you look at the episode numbers, that one is like outside of the rest of the numbering system, so it doesn't count as a numbered episode. And I think it was kind of very hush hush, wasn't it, when it was made? Did you enjoy that one as much as I did? I just adored it from start to finish.
I thought it was good, but the thing is, you hype it so much that it's never gonna live up to what you know. I don't know.
I think it was after that point though that Curly takes a bit of a nosedive, and I don't think you were ever that into him as a character, were you? I always quite like Curly. I would definitely say that when I started watching it, he was one of my favourite characters, but early 2000s, he just got a bit dull. And he was a counsellor or something, and then he goes out with Emma, and
Emma was like the death.
Yeah.
Yep.
What else we got? Let's talk.
Well, let's talk about Tracy, because Tracy.
Oh yes, we got our Kate Ford Tracy now, haven't we?
She came in, and it was like the cat amongst the pigeons, wasn't it? She was vindictive, horrible, predatory. she ruined Roy, didn't she?
Yeah, that thing with where she bets. She has a bet of Bev, doesn't she? That she can take Roy to
like
bed.
A penny or a pound,
yeah, that's right. And that was quite early on in Kate Ford's tenure as Tracy, wasn't it? It was in the first year or two. So it was like they knew what they were doing with her straight away.
I can't remember whether Tracy was a villain.
When?
Well, before Kate Ford. I can't remember anything about Tracy.
Not really. She went off the rails a little bit, didn't she, with the Dawn Acton Tracy?
Did she come back from somewhere?
There was she kind of mid-90s. Tracy just moves away, and then she kind of comes back every now and again. She goes away with her older boyfriend, and then she's just not in it very much. And then once every now and then she'll turn up again. And we saw her getting married to Robert in 99 or something. I can't remember. But no, she was never a villain. She just became gradually a little bit more of a thorn in Deirdre's side as time went on.
She was just like a difficult teenager, though.
Yeah.
And then when Kate Ford took over, Tracy was just like, one of the most unlikable people, probably, or like you probably
still so fun.
Love to watch her, but hate her personality because she was a very big character and she was behind a lot of the mischief on the street. So the thing that she did was she pretended that she slept with Roy to mess with his head. So she drugged him and then she took him up into her bedroom and made him go to sleep there. And then in the morning when he woke up, he assumed that they had slept together. And they did really good a reaction to that because the first of all there's the excruciating walk down the stairs.
Well, there's also like he has to pick up her bra or something to get his socks, something, and it's really funny.
Yeah, the awkward moment when he wakes up and he doesn't want to wake her up, but he wants to get out and he needs to find his clothes. Then he tiptoes down the stairs, but Deirdre and Ken
and little Adam is there as well.
And they're like, do you want breakfast? And he's like, oh God, and then he leaves. But then, and I guess you're laughing, but then when it cuts to him in the shower, and he's freaking out, and he's washing the sins away almost because he was married, illegally to Hayley at the time, so he was dedicated his life to her, and then he thinks he's done this behind her back.
And of course Hayley's not there at the moment because she's attending a sick relative.
Yeah, that's right. And then Tracy gets pregnant. She tells Roy that it's his baby, and then the Croppers sort of adopt Patience, they call her. And
then she's tragically whisked away from her at the was it the wedding or was it the christening? I can't remember. One of the two.
She goes and she causes a fuss at Steve and Karen's wedding, and she gets threatened with a stiletto.
Yeah.
And then she also causes a fuss at the christening of the baby. And does she mess up Steve and Karen's second? I can't remember. But her and Karen have this massive ongoing feud, don't they? For almost from the beginning.
That was brilliant.
Of Kate Ford's Tracy, because they both, Tracy always loved Steve. There was even a scene recently in Corrie where she says, I think I've loved you more than you love me. Because obviously, she's just one of many as far as Steve's concerned. But this kind of, the rivalry between those two, that was a massive story thread throughout these episodes. And then it culminates with Karen going off the rails, kidnapping Amy because Karen had a miscarriage, and all she really wanted was a baby.
Well, what we didn't see in 2004 was very much of the breakdown story. We saw little bits, didn't we? But she really regresses, and it was after her mum dies, and she has all these flashbacks
because
of when
she had a very religious upbringing, and she was always told she was worthless.
Yeah, we didn't see too much of that.
It was very traumatic, and she was abused. And when her mum died, she kind of tried to make out that she didn't care. And it didn't bother her, and she had this sort of sheen of bravado, but it all kind of went away. And there was an epic rooftop battle, the same episode when Claire and Ashley are getting married. There's a Christmas Day rooftop battle between Tracy and Karen in the rain, when Karen's sort of like draped across the side of the building about to drop to her death and Tracy's standing over her with a stick about to stave her brains in, which is literally the definition of overkill. And then Steve comes and rescues Karen, and Karen kind of like thinks, I don't know, she kind of expects them to reconcile, but Steve kicks her out, and then that's really the end of Karen.
Yeah, it is. That was Christmas Day, and then Boxing Day she's gone, but we didn't even see that, did we? So we've seen the last of Karen now, and up next it's Becky, I suppose, in Steve's long line of ladies. So I'm looking forward to seeing her soon. Yeah, definitely.
There was also a little mini storyline with the Harrises when. And the Nelsons/Harrises, and they come in and.
Well, this is what I mean about characters like that were together for this little era and then just disappeared.
Yeah.
I thought they were quite good. Really,
it was a really good. I think that witness protection. I think that was a bit of a trope back in the day. The same way that when we were kids, everyone would fall into quicksand and die. It's like witness protection. That seemed to be like capture people's imaginations, and so Coronation Street had a story about a witness protection family, and you don't know that that's who they are until Katie gets sort of trapped, doesn't she?
Oh yeah,
was that in this bit?
Yeah, that was it. I think we knew before then, but we didn't see it. But
we didn't know immediately though. It came out.
Yeah,
after a while
the gang members that included the guy who used to play Eddie Windass.
Yeah,
or they went on to play Eddie Windass.
That's
Steve
right.
Reeson.
We knew before then because they, for some stupid reason, well, it wasn't for a stupid reason. It was because they were stupid. They get a phone and they start texting people that they know.
Yeah, that's right.
And saying where they are.
Yeah.
And then everybody talks to everybody else, and then their cover gets blown, and then the thugs come and they're like threatening to kill Katie. And
and she's diabetic, and they won't let her have her insulin, will they?
She keeps saying, "Oh, I'm gonna faint."
Yeah.
And then you've also with the Harrises, another big story there is her and Martin.
Yes. Which we haven't seen a whole lot of their relationship, have we?
This just cements how the fact that I really find Martin an unlikable character.
I don't think I think that this was the era that Martin massively declined for us, and part of it was that never-ending story where he was going out with Jill Halfpenny's character, that nurse, Rebecca was she called? She just wouldn't go away. And every time she said she was going to leave, then she would pop up again. And we just, even though we were watching just snippets, it felt like every episode for weeks that we were watching, he'd be sneaking off and having a secret loving sessions with Jill Halfpenny.
The thing that annoys me about Martin is that he's a character who acts as though all his misfortunes are things that are foisted and happening to him rather than him being the instigator. He spends a lot of his time running around, like moaning and shouting about stuff, all of which he's brought on himself.
Yeah.
Not sympathetic to him at all.
Well, he ends up I can't remember what the final story is with him and Gail, but he ends up buggering off so that she can go out with Richard Hillman.
Runs off with this little girl, doesn't he?
Yeah, and currently they're still together, aren't they? I think that's what we're watching.
And there was just this horrible, cringy scene where they're in the kitchen together, and she's like, "Oh, I made you tea" or something. And then she's like, "Anyway, I've got to go to school." It's like, oh man, like as a grown man, how could you, like, how old is he there? Is he the same age as us? I don't know.
No,
maybe
he's
a bit younger.
He's younger.
But like a girl in school, and you're like, make my dinner.
Yeah.
And do your homework.
Very weird. Yeah. Speaking of schoolgirls, we also had Candice this era, didn't we?
Yeah, she's not been in very many
She's not been in loads, but I don't think she was ever really a major character. But I've quite enjoyed seeing her again, even if there wasn't anything majorly remarkable that she did. What else did we have? Okay, talking about relationships then, another big story towards the beginning of this was the Mike and Linda Sykes story, which we're starting to see. We're seeing the beginning of it on ITV3 at the moment, and I do have to apologise to anyone who's watching the classic Coronation Street episodes, because this whole discussion is basically just spoiling what's going to be coming up for you for the next few years. But it was okay. The Mike and Linda stuff. The wedding was kind of exciting when it all comes out about her having an affair with Mark.
Well, that was a very dramatic, few scenes, wasn't it? Because they were supposed to be getting married in this big mansion, And then she goes up, or they both go up, and he's there, the son, Mark, drunk, and sort of melancholic and threatening to blow the lid on the whole thing. And she's trying to convince him not to. And then Mike comes along, and then she's trying to get Mark to shut up, but then it all comes out, and then she's desperately trying to convince Mike to stay with her, and he won't have it. And the whole thing ends in a very nasty fashion. But then for quite a long time, I was like, has he murdered her or something?
Yeah, because the story goes like Linda does a bunk, doesn't she? And then we never see her again, and Mike does get accused of murdering her.
But it turns out all right in the end. Well,
turns out all right in the end.
The actress left, didn't she?
Yeah.
And she left so abruptly that actually some of the scenes in that episode aren't even her.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because
she just went, bye then.
Yeah. Yeah, that was weird, but I can't say I was too disappointed to see the back of her.
I did never like Linda. She was a right horrible bitch, wasn't she? She was. I'm trying to. There's nobody really like her. She's just unlikable. They didn't make any effort. She was very unpleasant, and she wasn't even likably unpleasant. She was just an arrogant arsehole to everybody.
Yeah.
And she always looked like she smelled.
So speaking of very unpleasant characters, we also got to see Cilla, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
I think I used to think, and this is maybe up until quite recently, that when I look back I preferred Les and Cilla, but actually I think now that I've seen a lot more of Les and Janice together with Toya and Leanne, I do prefer the Battersbys as the original family unit, and Cilla was very, very unlikable, and rewatching her again, I could totally get why at the time people didn't have any time for Cilla. She was almost obnoxiously, unlikably nasty. She had her fun points.
She was very confrontational.
Yeah, and she just always seemed like she's out to get whatever she can. And there was the little story where Rita clips Chesney around the ear, and Cilla's there saying, "Well, we're gonna take this penny sweet shop owner to the cleaners." And but we also did have the jacuzzi scene we watched recently, didn't we? That was kind of fun with Schmeichel in, who he grew very fast.
I know, it was really funny listening to you being astounded at how quickly this dog grew up.
Because he comes into it in like spring 2004, doesn't he, Schmeichel? And he's this little puppy that Maya gave Chesney because...
That's right.
No, did he give it to Chesney or did he give it to Tyrone? I can't remember. Because she steals Monica or something at first, doesn't she? I can't remember.
It was a gift from Maya.
Yeah, and this little tiny Schmeichel was so
with
cute.
Big feet.
And then a couple of episodes later, he's like dwarfing Chesney.
Oh,
but yeah, he was really cool. And I did enjoy the old little Chesney, and Fizz was fun. We saw Fizz's rooftop protest, didn't we? Where she
oh god,
on top of the factory roof, where she gets her knockers out in front of everybody.
Yeah, it was so much stuff happened in these 5 years. It's kind of, and we've been watching it for a few months now. So
yeah. I mean, this is 3 or 4 months. Some of it is like, it feels like too long ago to
honestly,
remember.
The Millennium two-hander really feels like it happened so...
I mean, we started off watching this set of episodes back in the old house, didn't we, of course?
What house is that?
Way back in the old house. What else did we have that we enjoyed? The Freshco siege was good, wasn't it? That was another early on one. That was a 2-parter where one of the episodes was after dark, and they actually get a proper swear word in and everything, don't they?
Yeah.
To show just how tough this gunman is, he calls somebody a
gob-ass.
Yes, exactly. So rude. But that was so cool, because I particularly like Ken and Mike being tied up together in the back room, and them putting their differences to one side.
This is the one where I said it was like a Mitchell and Webb sketch from Peep Show.
Yeah.
Like Jez and Mark.
Oh yeah. I thought you were talking about Jez Quigley, who we also got to see in this. No. But no, that Freshco siege was very, very, very well done. Mike having his little heart attack, and then they all have a barbecue together because they're trapped in there and they want stuff to eat. The police come. It ends up with Boring Emma shooting Dean Sykes, Linda's brother. That was I don't think it's particularly remembered. That I think the people that know about it remember it, do bang on about how great it was, but it hasn't gone down as one of the all-time Corrie greats. But I remember watching that thinking that was really, really good episode. a couple of months ago when we watched it. We had the Corrie live for the 40th anniversary. That was great. With Prince Charles in and Vera lying there because we ended up watching quite a few episodes in the lead up to that, didn't we? Because it had the Claytons coming back from the 80s, including Terry's son. Is it Brad who needs this kidney? No, not Brad. Brad was thingy's Trisha's son, Paul Clayton. He needs a kidney, and then Terry says that he'll do it, and then he chickens out at the last minute, so Vera has to go under the knife. And the live episode was very well done. And then had Noddy Holder turn up at the end, didn't it? What else did we have? What else did you enjoy?
Don't know.
You're running out of steam a little bit.
There were so many things that happened. It's hard to remember everything. I mean, I read the recap before we started recording.
I think we talked about most of the main bits that we enjoyed. The things
that really stuck out to me, we've discussed it, honestly.
We had Susan's come back when she ends up getting run over by Billy or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. We had Alma's death. Did we talk about that? That was really well done.
About it a little bit. Yeah, that was very poignant. I think I've seen that clip so many times. I think everybody has. Who's watched clip shows, because it was, really sad. And
when Audrey gets there just at the last minute.
Yeah, she's too late to say goodbye because they'd fallen out, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And there's that really sad scene where everyone's just sitting around the deathbed, and Audrey comes in and she's talking to her like she's still alive, but she's not.
Yeah, because she's the scene before she goes in, she's sitting in the car outside with Gail, isn't she? And they're saying you got to go in, and Audrey's too scared to go in because she doesn't want to go and see Alma die. Well, yeah. And doesn't Linda come out and fetch her and say, you need to come in now? But they said it's too late.
I like that because it is scary, and it's easy if you've not been in that situation to judge Audrey and say, oh, but you silly girl, you should have gone in when because you knew it was your last chance. But death is scary, and knowing and what to say is scary, and wondering if you'll react in a weird way is scary. And her fears prevented her from saying goodbye to her best friend, and the show didn't judge her really for it, which is right, because sometimes in life when we're confronted with something really difficult, we do mess up and we don't do the right thing, and it's not really our fault, but it's something that you've got to live with if you do. And I thought that was right, because I think unless you know someone who's been very sick, or you've been very sick yourself, you don't really realise that a lot of the hardship that comes along with it is other people and them not really knowing what to say or do. And it really is a weirdly natural reaction for humans to just avoid someone who's sick. And it's sad.
It is very, really sad. That was so well done. Another one that I remember enjoying was the 44th wedding anniversary of Jack and Vera, where they go to the potting shed, and Jack's cooked her a fish supper or something, hasn't he? And Vera turns up there, and there's the scarecrow that he's dressed up to look like Vera, and they just have a nice little romantic time there, and they remember when they first spent the night together in her dad's potting shed or something, and then they sit, and it just ends with them sitting out on the bench telling each other they love each other and sort of singing, "Been together now for 44 years." That was super romantic. I just want to say, I can't believe that he got planning permission for a 2-room shed. It was pretty big, wasn't it? It's pretty palatial, but I think he inherited that, so it's not his fault. I was saying that was lovely and romantic. We also got to see Tyrone and Maria at the Blackpool Tower, which was a fairly boring episode. Yeah, but that was one of your most treasured Corrie memories. That is one of my favourite Corrie moments, and it didn't let me down. It was so sweet. It's really funny that you're a bit of an old softie, really, and a bit of a romantic, which I'm surprised to hear, because you've never been like that with me. But two of your most favourite treasured Corrie episodes of that one and the two-hander with Curly and Raquel. I love that. There's some of the romantic moments I love. Hayley and Roy at the airport, and Yeah.
Well, if you ever want to create any romantic memories with me, just let me know.
Take you up Blackpool Tower or...
We've already done that.
Oh, yeah. Nothing happened,
I think
did
we
it?
weren't fast, were we?
We saw kind of the breakdown in the Battersby's marriage in this time as well, didn't we? Which was sad. But there was a great episode where Janice leaves Les for Dennis, and it's pretty much just them, little bit of Eileen all episode, with like sprinkling of Jason and Todd and Toyah and that. And the first half of the episode is all Les and Janice, and it reminded me a little bit of the scene we had earlier this year with Tyrone and Fizz, and a lot of time given to the breakup of this big relationship in the show with some great dialogue and everything. That was a great episode. Then Dennis has to go around to Eileen to fess up to her and everything. It was very sad. And then we had Dennis's death a few episodes after. What else did we have? Trying to go down. I think you're right. I think we talked about most of these. Norris being the medal bearer at the Commonwealth Games was fun.
That was great. That was really good fun.
That was a real highlight.
We were
for
really
Norris.
confused. Like, did this happen? Because it looked like it was.
It was
filmed
actually
there.
filmed at the Commonwealth Games, wasn't it? A few weeks before this was broadcast.
How did they do it? Did they say, "Do you mind if we just get a character from our show to give somebody a medal?"
I guess they must have done.
And so the person who got the medal, were they in on it, or did they like, "Oh, you're going to be in Coronation Street"?
I don't know whether that was an actor.
Yeah,
that's
what I mean. I'd love to know more about how they filmed that.
But that was quite sad, wasn't it? The fact that he was trying to get Emily to record it and she couldn't get the tape to work.
Yeah.
And
everyone was totally unbothered by it, weren't they?
Well, they were all watching a really great darts match that Les Battersby was playing in the pub, and then in the TV in the background you get to see Norris looking all proud, and he's like got a little tear in his eye and everything, and everybody misses it apart from maybe, isn't it, Nick gets to see it, but then he goes off to Canada because Nick comes back and forth a few times during this little stint. Still Adam Rickett Nick, although I think we get to see Ben Price Nick in the next chunk of 5 years. What else did we have? We had Peter's bigamy story. That kind of seemed to fly by pretty quickly, didn't it? It didn't feel to me like it was that massive when we got to see that. Although I still did enjoy the confrontation when Shelley and Peter Shelley and Lucy reveal to Peter that they know that he's dating both of them. Although in my head, I pictured them coming into the Rovers and telling him behind the bar, but it was actually behind in the back room of the pub. Did you enjoy that, or did it was it just like meh to you?
What?
Go on. I did enjoy the Shelley having a date with Eric Gartside, the Peter Kay's character. That was fun.
I've got a bit of a thing about celebrity cameos in Coronation Street. I find them quite annoying, and then I don't think they're on the whole very well done, because I think they pander too much to the celebrities, and there's too much like But I tell you what, the calibre of his acting was fantastic.
Yeah,
and his comedic timing, it was just a masterclass, wasn't it? He was fantastic. He owned that character. He was great.
Yeah, that was also quite good, because that was an episode that I don't think I'd seen before. There were a couple of episodes with him, and weren't there? Because that was when I was living in France, and I'd seen some bits of it on clip shows, but there were definitely a good few scenes and lines that I hadn't seen before. So I got to appreciate that. Taking her to the restaurant and everything, and then taking her home to see his mum. And what was the mum doing?
Well, she was in bed, wasn't she? And she came downstairs and she was like, "Don't sit in that chair, it's my husband's chair.
Oh,
he's
yeah,
dead."
that's right, yeah.
And like, we'll have the fire on. And she was just being bitchy. She was like really, really bitchy.
Yeah, and Shelley ends up telling Eric that she can't she can't go out with somebody who hasn't cut the apron strings yet. But also in that episode, that was also the one that had Tyrone and Fizz dressing up as Jack and Vera, because Kirk had stolen an engagement ring from a wedding shop, from a jeweller's, hadn't he? So that he could propose to Fizz. Is that right?
I can't remember. I can't remember why.
And then they dress up as Jack and Vera to go and return the ring back to the shop.
That
and
was really
I had no memory of ever seeing that before. That's a weird scene, because I feel like if this was in the folder on someone's desktop that they use when they're going for classic Corrie clips, this would be something that we'd see every single time they were like, and the laughs. That would be in it. But for some reason it's been forgotten. Yeah, that has. Danny Baldwin. I enjoyed him. I think he hit the ground running much like Eileen did.
I liked all the Baldwins. I liked their Cockney accents. I thought it was weird because the scenes where they're all just talking to each other, I can see why people were saying, "Oh, it's just like EastEnders. It's stupid." Rah 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 rah. Because they really did dominate. The episode, and it was weird too because it was like watching a really weird modern day Downton Abbey with Vera going, Jack's moaning at me about his tea, and then she's there going, oh dear, I'm so bored at home. You know what I mean? Like sitting in front of the TV with Vera as her cleaning lady, complaining that she's bored. Like, if you're bored, love, you could do the cleaning and save yourself some money.
I thought that Danny Baldwin's first episode was fantastic, and because he gets right in there, and
another example of somebody who really accomplished a great introduction.
Because one of the things that people remember about Danny Baldwin is giving all the factory workers nicknames, isn't he? And he comes in, and that's like his first episode. It's like, right, who's the gobby one? And right, Karen's like, that's me. Oh no, and Janice is like, I'm not gobby. So they I'm gobby, I'm bullshit or whatever.
He basically tricks them, and he immediately learns who everyone is. And like he tricks them by saying that he's made a mistake.
Like, I made a mistake here. I told them that we'd be able to get this order done by the end of the day today.
And he's like, and he kind of like guilt trips Hayley and like makes her think it's her fault.
Yeah.
And forces them all to work doubly hard, and then he, at the end of the day, he's like, "Well, you've proven to me that you can work really hard, so I expect you to do this every day." They were up in arms, weren't they?
Yeah. He also in that first episode had a fight with Les, didn't he? Much to Janice. Well, Janice is like, "That's my ex-husband," and he's like, "You can thank me later," because Les like pushes him, and then Danny kind of goes back on the car and then punches Les, and he's like, "Oh, it's springy aluminium," or I can't remember, but he had a really, really strong first episode. But again, the Baldwins, another little clan that came into it, did a few little bits for a few years, and then just disappeared, and now people have got, even me, have got just vague memories that they were ever there, and it feels like it's almost a different show.
Yeah.
The Corrie with the old Baldwins in.
Yeah.
What else did we have? Oh, you said what we were saying about Vera earlier. We just had a great Vera moment the other day, didn't we? In the Mad Meyer episode, where the shop's on fire, and number 13 next door is starting to catch a flame as well, and Ken's knocking on all the doors, and then he goes to number 9. He's like, Vera, there's a fire, and Vera comes out and he's just like, oh, hiya, Ken. Oh my god.
I know. So she heard him shout, fire, fire, come outside, and she was like, hiya, Ken.
That was great. It was a decent era, I think, but for some of the reasons that we talked about at the beginning of this episode, and it's not feeling as classic as some of the proper classic ones. There were some brilliant episodes, there were some good episodes, but just not so many very good episodes maybe in there.
I don't know, there's a lot of fun stuff. It just, the magic of the earlier episodes is gone for me, but I don't want people to get the wrong impression of my opinion of Coronation Street, because a lot of the reasons why aren't necessarily to do with the quality of the episodes.
I'm just looking down a list of the other new characters in this era, and there are still some that we've barely or not even mentioned, like Sam Kingston, for example, who was he made a bit of an impression on us for the snippet of time that he was in, wasn't he? Just because he was so miserable.
The Masked Python.
Yeah.
He was like you know how there's a trope of like the happy idiot because they're cheerful because they're too stupid to realise how dreadful life is. He was like the idiot burdened with the knowledge of like the future Armageddon of the planet or something. He was just like the saddest, droopiest dog hanging face ever.
Yeah.
Just moping around, and because he was so tall as well. I think there's something quite comical about a hangdog expression tall man. and it was such a weird like dichotomy between what he was supposed to be and who he actually ended up being, because he was supposed to be a stripper. Can you imagine a stripper coming in to a party with all these girls going woo woo, imagine he's there just going, I'm just thinking about the eventual death of the universe.
I don't remember much about what his stories were. He went out with Toya for a bit, didn't he?
And it was weird with him being with Toya too, because she can sometimes be a bit of a misery guts herself, especially back in those days. Po-faced. And just the pair of them, just moping around, sort of like they kind of reminded me in all but, appearance, like the goth kids from South Park.
Yeah.
They just needed a cigarette and some black clothes.
Also miserable with the Ramsdens. We had Charlie and Matt Ramsden that kind of came in and out very quickly,
They're another example of Coronation Street hating upper middle class.
The teacher and the doctor.
Yeah, and she came in like a massive raging bitch, didn't she? Because she was like, oh, we've got to slum it here with these people and complaining and laughing at everybody and hating everyone and just being a bitch. And then the whole thing blew up because they really hated each other and he was cheating on her. And...
Oh, yeah, because he had that night with Maxine, didn't he? And that's where little baby Joshua came.
Yeah, that's right.
That was quite a good episode.
She was kind of relatable in a way, because because she just wasn't having it.
Yeah. We had another forgettable character, Harry Flagg.
Harry Flagg, it was like... He was like Poochie in Itchy and Scratchy. Like he came
but not as cool.
Yeah, but he just came in like he's been there the whole time. And you're like, no, you're new.
Sweeped a few floors, cleaned a few bogs, and then fogged off himself.
And wasn't there a bit where he kind of like solved everyone's problems in the
I think
factory?
He was kind of wise, but
he was like
unremarkable.
a special guest star who's come to solve everyone's problems.
Yeah.
There was also Dennis Stringer who had a very tragic exit, and he was
Eileen boyfriend. He was good.
And he died in a car crash. And there was that quite sad scene when you had two different groups of people going to the hospital, and one gets good news and the other one gets bad news, and there was a mix-up.
Yeah, I think, because that was when because Janice had left Les for Dennis just a few months before, hadn't she? And then Dennis.
Yeah, and they both get in the car together, and there's a crash. Yeah, because they both end up at the hospital, and then she gets there.
No, wasn't it that didn't Les try to kill himself on New Year's? And he drives away somewhere and tries to gas himself. Dennis goes off searching for him, finds him, and it's like, right, we need to take you to the hospital. But in the rush to the hospital, they end up flipping off the road. I think that's how it happened. But yeah, that was kind of tragic. But again, Dennis has kind of been lost to the annals of time.
It has been. But that was pretty solid.
Yeah, that was solid.
Emma Watts is like the worst character ever.
Kelly Crabtree we've seen a little bit of.
Her.
There's been a few factory girls, hasn't there? You had like your Bobby Lewis and your Sonia and everything. That there aren't really very many characters that are just there to be factory girls, but they've got names, but they don't really do anything, which this era they had, and almost like they kind of need that at the moment because the factory staff at the moment is so depleted. You bring back your Sonia or your Bobby or your Kelly or whatever maybe.
Less said about Orchid, the better.
Oh yeah, we saw a little bit of Orchid, didn't we? Now apparently in this era, this was supposed to be the beginning of Yana Lum, not that we saw her, and also Jenny Reese, who's the registrar played by Blue Merrick. She did her first her service this year. We didn't get to see that, but maybe we'll get to see her soon. Violet we saw for an episode, didn't we?
Yeah, she slept with Jason and then got to have Christmas dinner with them.
Yeah.
If I was Eileen, I'd have a lot of questions about a woman who had nowhere to be on Christmas Day.
I've also got a little list here about other exits that have happened. I wonder whether any of those are particularly remarkable. Nita and Natalie just kind of pop off, don't they? Gary ends up finding a new woman, new redhead who he rescues in Blackpool. Alison's death was quite good. Again, very sorry for anyone who's watching classic Coronation Street at the moment, because Alison was such a bland character, but actually just recently in ITV3 she's been having some fairly decent stuff where she's
Kevin's girlfriend.
Yeah, well she marries him in the end, doesn't she?
And she goes mad.
She goes mad, and because she loses the baby, and then or does she lose the baby or does it get born and then die? I can't remember, but she ends up stealing baby Bethany, doesn't she? And there's a great little scene where she does a long tragic speech before running in front of a lorry. So she had quite a good exit actually. And like I said, right at the moment in ITV3, she's we're learning about her past and how she feels she was responsible for her sister's death. It's fairly good, but on the whole, fairly dull character. But yeah, at least she got a good exit. Just looking down these other lists of Danny Hargreaves, he was boring as well. You get, as you know, at the moment, if you're watching on ITV3, that was Sally's bloke that she went out with for a bit. He kind of goes between.
He's posh and he doesn't really like the kids.
No, that's Greg Kelly you're thinking of. No, he was the market trader. He goes out with Sharon for a little bit as well in the late 90s, but he was fairly dull.
Don't remember.
Vikram went off. We didn't get to see much of his exit. I think all these other ones we've heard of. I suppose the only other thing that we haven't really talked about so far is some of the recasts we've seen, because this era saw the new Rosie and Sophie, didn't it? We got to see young Helen Flanagan, which was quite cool. She ended up starting quite a long time before Brooke Vincent, because we've only seen a little bit of Brooke, haven't we? A few of her episodes. But getting to see the young Helen Flanagan interacting with young Jack P. Shepherd has been quite cool. Doesn't David kind of fancy Rosie for a little bit? I can't remember.
Yeah, he kind of fixates on her, doesn't he, a little bit?
Yeah, he does a little bit. I mean, we've talked about these recasts, like Susan, when we talked about Gordon Clegg comes back for Betty's leaving party, and that's played by somebody else, but then he goes back to being the original actor at the very end. But yeah, I think that we're kind of done. I enjoyed it, and I think in the late 90s we talked about the fact that earlier this year we had a break from this for about a month, didn't we? We were trying to get through 1996, and it was such a slog. We were like, we need to just pause our classic Coronation Street watching at the moment. And I don't think there was ever a time during this where we thought, let's give it a break. It was always all right to watch an episode. Yeah. But equally, there weren't very many we were like, oh, we got to watch this, we got to see what happens next, got to watch it. It just kind of, it was on, and then occasionally there'd be a really, really good episode. And I think that's probably going to continue into the second half of the noughties. So I had a little look in the DVD case just the other day to see what was upcoming, and there are definitely some classics there. But I'm still just really looking forward to getting to the end of 2009 so we can say, right, let's go back to the 60s again, because I'm getting a real hankering. Back to the
60s. I want to see every episode I can.
I know, because with this, I mean, back in the 60s we watched just the DVDs, didn't we? So we watched 8 episodes a year. But now, because we're watching more than just the DVDs, some year we're watching like 15, 20 episodes. We're pretty much watching at least twice as much as we were back then, and that's another reason why it's taken us 3-4 months to get to this stage. But absolutely, once this is done, so it's probably going to be March, April time maybe, and we'll have been doing this for over 2 years now.
I know.
It was the beginning of it's just before the beginning of the pandemic that we started watching the 60s episodes, and I'm very much looking forward to doing this. But it's still been a great experience, and once we reach the end of 2009, as well as doing a little rundown of these next 5 years, we'll also have to have a talk about the whole experience of watching Corrie from kind of start to finish, almost. Not obviously not all of it, but what our reflections are on the fact that we did it. And then it took us so long to do as well, didn't it? We were doing the podcast for like 7-8 years before we even decided to let's go back and watch some of the old ones. Yeah. I wish I'd done it sooner, but at the same time, it has been interesting, and it's given me a different perspective to have kind of steeped myself in the kind of myths and legends of the early years before I even got to watch it. And I really, really wish we had done some kind of pre-Old Corrie episode where I tried to piece together what my impressions were, you know? Yeah.
It's difficult to remember what I thought. Or what I thought, what did I expect of X, Y, or Z?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
No, I don't know.
I think it feels like we're done. We're running out of steam for this. Hope you all enjoyed hearing about that. Sorry again if we spoiled it for the people that are keeping up at ITV3 pace at the moment. You'll probably forget all about this by the time it comes around anyway. And as always with these, what?
It's not the same as a normal spoiler.
No.
Because it's got it in the title that we're going to be talking about these years.
And of course, a lot of our, as with all of these, our thoughts were probably fairly rambling and incoherent and jumping from one year to the next. And we understood each other, but there's probably a lot of people listening that are like, what on earth they're talking about? 1 minute they're talking about Vera Duckworth's Scarecrow, the next they're talking about Danny Baldwin, then they're talking about Alison throwing herself in front of a lorry. But it made sense to us anyway. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if you were around and watching Coronation Street in that era and you haven't caught any of it, since the original airing, hopefully that brought back a few memories for you, and maybe even made you want to go out and get that DVD yourself. So we are done for now. We're going to get this uploaded later on this week, and find me, and then this time next week we'll be looking at seeing what's going on for episode 500 as well. So thank you everybody for listening. Gemma, any final words from you?
No.
No final words from Gemma, nor me. Abby's asleep, so we're going to go there. Thank you for listening, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.